Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So before we start, can anyone summarize how far we have discussed? Anyone?
Ma'am, in the last class, we were discussing about carrier sense multiple access with collagen detection. And
Okay.
we discussed about various persistent methods, jamming signal.
Okay. And the first thing is that why are we talking about that? I mean, in embedded communication concept, what are we trying to find? That is important, right? So anyone, why are we talking about CSMA?
Best real-time protocol. That's what we are trying to.
Pardon?
The best protocol, real-time protocol.
Real-time protocol, yes. Best real-time means when we are talking about embedded communication protocol, remember in the first class, we are talking about that our concept of OSI model, right? And we have basically divided, layered our communication concept in different parts. So you were correct. We were talking about that. We are talking about CSMSD. And can you tell in which layer? I mean, about which layer we were talking about?
Data link layer.
Yes. For data link layer, so what is the problem we have identified that in traditional CSMSD, or basically when we are trying to find that whether my existing technology is suitable to adapt in my embedded networking scenario. So there we are starting with most basic requirement that when I have multiple components and we are trying to communicate over a shared media, what protocol, what strategy we will adopt so that we can avoid collision between multiple stations, communication between multiple stations, right? So we want collision-free communication, but to guarantee that, we need to apply certain algorithm. And the existing algorithm in our most prominent LAN technology is Ethernet. So we have started from there, and we are checking that the LAN technology, in that LAN technology, whatever collision sensing, collision handling method we actually use, whether that is suitable for our embedded scenario or not. So that we are finding that how we can think of developing our data link layer in our embedded scenario, right? So what was our findings? What is the limitation that we have identified?
Ma'am, randomization, which is not acceptable in embedded system.
Yes. So the randomization present in case of persistent part, in case of next lot detect, whether to in the waiting time detection part, those are not acceptable when we are, waiting for some algorithm in embedded scenario, because their deterministic approach is a requirement. Okay. So with that, probably we were in this slide. Where we mentioned the limitation in embedded applications. We talked about that embedded applications where the communication spatially is not like something like workstations, where we generally prefer bulk data transfer. Here, the smaller, shorter message transfer is is a more common requirement in embedded scenario. And that is also very periodic traffic with real-time constraint. And in some cases, to meet the hard deadline, some message should be prioritized in comparison to other messages. Those are related to very regular tasks. So realization or smart handling of prioritized messages. And of course, when we are talking about embedded scenario or everything is restricted, so this is cost sensitive application. In this overall, with these overall requirement, we have to check in our embedded communication protocol whether my protocol efficiency is maintained or not. Protocol efficiency means how much actual message is delivered compared to whatever raw network bandwidth I have. So maintaining this protocol efficiency is very important, because you can understand that in turn related to my meeting of deadline, the final requirement of my embedded, embedded or CPS scenario. So of course, when embedded communication, we are talking about embedded communication, both the types of communications will be preferred, will be required. One is the point-to-point and one is the shared medium. And in point-to-point, since a dedicated link is there, reliability is high, but again, that is costly. When each link is dedicated, maintaining the link, everything, that is not very cost effective when we are going for a huge complicated network. But in that dedicated point-to-point network, it is easy to meet the real-time deadline, because there is no concept of collision, no concept of thinking that what other stations are doing, whether they are trying to communicate or not. And all these problems, what we talked about, is there in shared media network. But still, in most of the scenarios, we have to choose this shared media due to the cost effectiveness, right? Okay. Now, when we were talking about, we have to consider, or we have to think about the overheads that may come in between my proposed protocol and my deadline requirement, or real-time requirement. Then two main overheads we are going to consider. One is the packet overhead and one is the media access overhead. And this part maybe slightly we have started talking about it. So about the packet overhead, what we mean that all non-data bits added by the protocol to ensure proper routing of your packet. That means when you are in a shared media and your stations are connected, multiple stations are connected, multiple components are connected. In that case, it is not sufficient that you are just sending the data. Associated to that, of course, some address information, some error handling information, all these things will come into picture. And that will increase that packet overhead. So this detail of this packet overhead and how with some features are adding the packet overhead, and in which context we can reduce this packet overhead, we will talk in detail in the second part of this class, when we will be talking about different protocols, and there we will check in every case what is the packet overhead, what is the increase of packet overhead, and what are the added features or what are the added benefits we are getting for that. Okay, as of now, we will just focus on whatever we are discussing, that is the media access overhead. So when media access overhead means the collision handling, multiple station transmission of multiple station handling. So in this case, we have seen that our existing LAN related Ethernet scenario is not perfectly fine to adapt in our embedded networking. Because we have to whenever we are choosing the protocol, we are trying to check about this protocol efficiency. We have to check the worst case behavior. That is important, because when you are actually deploying adapting a protocol, both best case and worst case, both will be your important features to consider when you are talking about this protocol efficiency. Now, if we go back to our Ethernet discussion, what can we comment on this worst case behavior? That in case of Ethernet, it is highly efficient when there is light traffic. That means most of the components, they are not communicating much. So light traffic in the shared bus, that means the bus is most of the time that is free, idle, and there is less chance of collision. Because if there will be no collision, remember that whole strategy, that no need to do that persistent waiting, no need to wait for with that back of time, all these steps will not be required. So in this worst case behavior, when we are thinking about with the light traffic, and of course, this is good enough. This Ethernet, adapting Ethernet is good enough. But when it is heavily loaded, that increases the chance of collision, and in that way, it will increase the chance of randomization. I mean, incorporation of randomized time in your overall timeline. And that may or may not lead to a certain deadline timing requirement that your overall framework may miss the actual required deadline. So that means in case of worst case analysis, Ethernet is good in light traffic scenario, but not in heavily loaded scenario. So next we are taking another protocol, a very common protocol, that is the token passing method, where we are eliminating the chance of any collision and we are trying to fully utilize the channel bandwidth. So what is the concept of this token passing? This is a channel access method where any station, maybe station 1, is starting, based on your protocol, is starting the communication and it is holding or generating a token. There's initial concept of token passing, the station 1 will hold a token until unless it is completing its required packet transfer. That means if maybe you can see in this example, station 1 is transmitting only one packet, packet 1, station 2 is station 2 packets, whereas station 4 is with 4 packets. So this is the initial concept of token passing, when as long as any station wants to transfer any packets, is interested in data communication, they can hold the token and they can transfer their packets. Later came the time-bound token passing concept, where it is true that any station, whenever that is holding any token, can transfer there, can start the communication, but it is not that if the station is willing, it can hold the token infinite time. There should be the token holding time is time bound. So that way, this time bound token passing is a comparatively better way to handle determinacy in embedded networking scenario. That's why compared to Ethernet, this is a better approach. But again, when we do this worst case behavior analysis, this is good. This token passing method is good for heavily loaded scenario, when all the stations are willing to transfer their packets. But in case of lightweight scenario, when most of the stations, they are not trying to transfer any packet, they are not willing to transfer any packet, still due to the time bound of the token will be retained with the station, and that incurs unwanted latency in the communication, because it's of no use at that time that the station is holding, but still due to the time limited feature of the algorithm, the token is with the station. Otherwise, that also can be modified with the feature that whenever the token station is willing to transfer, then only it will hold the token for that specific dedicated designated time period. Otherwise, it will release the token. Okay. In the third type of token passing, in this improved form of token passing, at least the station is not holding the whole time if it is not willing to transfer any packet. But just think about the scenario. If station 1 is trying to only interested to in packet transfer, station 2, station 3, station 4, they are not interested to transfer any packet. Still, due to the time boundness property of this token passing, station 1 will transfer perform the packet transfer maybe some m unit of time, then it will release the token. Now this token will go to the station 2, then it will go to the station 3, then it will go to the station 4, just to check whether if there is something to transfer or not. Then it will again come back to station 1, and at that time the station 1 will hold the token and again start the packet transfer for a minute of time. So this type of delay cannot be avoided in token passing. Just to traverse the ring to check whether any station is interested or not. So that way, when this is the disadvantage of this token passing protocol. In case of light demand, of course, that increases the unnecessary latency that may be used or added to some legitimate stations for their packet transfer. So these are the two major ways, two major directions how we can actually handle transfer in shared medium from multiple sources. Other MAC protocols in embedded domain, considering this knowledge, they also should have this real-time requirement, should have the prioritization capability, and many applications also that this part we will discuss later when we need some robust operations. And that is related to some error detection and recovery. So for that, also to maintain the robustness, there must be some feature added to your packet size and how that is increasing your packet overhead. This part we will talk later, maybe in packet overhead. But whenever we are actually proposing or considering other types of MAC protocols, these features should be there. So what are the other features? Of course, next one is polling. Polling means there is a centrally assigned master. That master is periodically polling the other connected nodes, and you can call them as slave nodes. If some slave is showing interest to interest to data transfer, then master node will actually take care of assigning bus to them, and then the data transfer will start. Now it also reduces the overall ring traversal latency that we discussed in token passing. But what is the risk? The risk associated with single point failure. That means if there is some problem in the master node, then the overall communication will get stalled. This is the main problem with this polling scenario, polling protocol. But still, it is heavily used in aircraft subsystem, Profibus. We will talk about it later, Profibus. Because when this type of failure scenario can be handled in a separate way, in that case, this polling can be actually very effective. in terms of handling latency in lightweight scenario and in terms of avoiding collision in heavyweight scenario. So this is another option other than token passing. Another option is pooling. Next option is the time division multiple access TDMA approach, where each node they are having some pre-allocated slots, time slots. And each node will transmit only in that pre-allocated slots. For that, to maintain those slots or to allocate those slots, there should be some approach of clock synchronization. So this is again good in terms of real-time data handling, because especially in case of prioritization of messages, because the slots may be assigned in such a way. We will see in case of later on some protocols we will discuss, especially in FlexRay on all, how the advantage of this DMA approach can be taken, where we can actually separate just the our regular data and our prioritized data for meeting the real-time deadline. And that way the slots can be allocated and the improvement can be incorporated in the overall protocol efficiency. Another approach that was very limited use and that was first proposed in CAN, Controller Area Network. We will talk about it just to give idea, that is based on the binary countdown, that is bit dominance algorithm. Most probably those who have already attended that fundamental basic ESTV background classes, there we have already discussed CAN. We talked about this binary countdown, bit dominance related, their priority arbitration protocol, where we have seen that who will take control of a bus, that is totally decided by some priority ID values. Now, if the level of this voltage level of this ID values is high or low, based on that, the communication channel will be assigned to that node. That means if you see here in this example, the example of 2 or 3 nodes are already given, node 71, 72 and node 42. Okay. Here that's some priority arbitration ID that is associated with each of the nodes. They are carrying some binary values, 0, 1 values. Based on the values, if you can see 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, that way, whenever for a particular, whenever all nodes are actually having same priority arbitration bits, here you can see all the bits are same, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, all 0 in the first cycle. In the second cycle, 1, 1, this is 0. That means node 42 is losing the arbitration, losing the control over bus. So idea is, whenever there is a change of high or low bits, and whenever there is a dissimilarity between what are the bits transmitted, and one bit is transmitting the, you can say here 1 or 0, but ideally in the CAN, in case of CAN, we use some other terminologies. When whoever the node, whichever is sending first this 0 bit, is basically losing the arbitration process and losing the control over the bus. So that means this is basically based on some bit dominance. Whatever bit you are sending in your particular ID value, based on that, it will be decided whether that node it will get the dominance over the bus or not. So that is basically binary countdown. We will talk this in CAN again. And these are the few options we have when we are talking about designing the MAC layer in our embedded scenario. So we have seen that what type of protocols are suitable. First, the Ethernet randomization associated with it. So that is not directly. This is good when we are actually designing some framework for heavyweight scenario, heavy loaded bus scenario. Next, we have talked about polling. That polling is good if we are thinking that we can handle confirm that there will be no significant node failure. In those scenarios, the fault tolerance of the system is high. Then that polling scenario is good. Next comes the time division multiple access, where we actually confirm that we can actually separately handle this real-time traffic or prioritized traffic and the not so prioritized traffic. And in binary countdown, this is a very specific proposal that was proposed in CAN that is based on some bit dominant strategy. But of course, everything is associated with their own overhead. For example, in CDMA, in spite of the fact we can associate slots with my real-time and not so real-time traffic, but if there is some scenario when some nodes are not interested, again this is a similar problem with the token busing. If some node is not interested to say transfer data in the bus, that means that slot is going vacant. And that means significant, that is unnecessary, we are losing some, we are adding some latency in our overall communication. Similarly, if we are going for this binary countdown that was used in CAN, we are basically assigning few bits just to check whether we can take someone can take control. I mean, just to decide who will take control over the bus. That means you are actually supporting this protocol with some extra bus and extra bits, and those bits are not getting used in your actual communication. Those bits are actually not communicating your actual message, but still it is taking significant amount of your network bandwidth. Okay, so we can see all this. These are few options that we can actually adapt in our embedded scenario, but we have to know for which protocol we are using and what may be the disadvantages associated with each protocols. Okay, so is there any question up to this?
Ma'am, in binary countdown, the priority is based on what message passing or this node ID?
Okay, I'm coming to this. In binary countdown, this is not a node ID. This is in your associated with your message, some priority arbitration. A few 11 bits actually are associated. These are special bits that is not related to node ID. Those are some priority arbitration bits we call. These are 11 bits associated. Those are the first 11 bits, and then your message starts. Okay, so these bits are specific for CAN nodes for two purposes. One is, we will talk this in detail when we will talk about CAN. First thing is that these 11 bits will ensure who will take the bus, and based on this 1 and 0 present in this 11 bits, low or high, based on that, one will get the bus, one will lose the bus. That means here, see, this is all 0, no problem. 1 1, whenever the first node is getting a 0 bit, it will lose the control, and the competition is between node 72 and node 71. Then again in 5th and 4th cycle, both the bits are same, 0 0. So both are in competition who will get the bus. Now in coming to this clock 3, when this node 72 is having a one bit in its priority arbitration ID. This is a particular ID. Okay, 11 bits associated with your the whole message communication frame. So this is 1, this is 0. That means this node 71 now losing the competition, and node 72 is actually getting the control over the bus. After this, the actual message will be accepted by the bus or communicated by the bus. But we will actually talk about this in detail, how to implement and all. But the two thing to understand, this basically gives the CAN shared bus the idea who will get the control of the bus. And number 2, the CAN node, when we will discuss, we will see that there is no specific address added to CAN messages. Like when one node is sending a message to some other nodes, the CAN frame, message frame, they do not contain any specific destination address. But types of this priority bits, these ID, actually informs the other nodes whether this is basically meaningful for those other nodes, whether they will accept this or they will reject this. So this is a very typical separate type of algorithm. Okay, we will discuss it. Any other question?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, who decides that what priority IDs, which nodes get what IDs?
Okay, which node get that is decided. There are different protocols related to that. One is maybe that is statically associated with that node. Maybe that is centrally decided runtime. So there are different scenarios happen. There's versions of how to decide this ID. But mostly, as of now, when any station is generating that message frame, it is actually supplying this 11-bit ID and then the message data. If it is actually getting hold of the node based on this 11-bit ID, then only these data bits, whatever there in 1 and 0, that is getting replicated as the data bit of the shared bus, and that is getting communicated to other stations. Okay?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Anything else?
Ma'am, if there is 0, 0 and 1, then also then what will happen? Then node 42 will get access, or it will loses instead of 1, 1, 0 in 6th.
You are telling here 0, 1, 0, 0 again 1, right?
No, ma'am. In vertical column, in 6th column.
In 6th column.
1, 1, 0. If we do 0, 0, 1.
Wait, I'm not. You are telling about 7. Yes, it is all 0, right? Next one, 6.
Next one, 0, 0 and 1 in vertical. Then node 72, 0, node 71, 0 and node 42, 1.
0, 0, 1. This way. Okay. You are telling about 0, 0, 1. 0, 0, 1. Like this.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. In 6th. In 6th.
In 6th.
Yes, ma'am. Instead of this 1, 1, 0.
Instead of 1, 1, 0, then what will happen? Directly node 72 and node 71 will lose the competition, and much early in the 6th step, in the 6th cycle. If it is, yes.
It is not that the number of similar things there are.
No, it is not that number of similar things are present. It is that who is first having, losing the competition or gaining the competition. Okay, when you are telling this scenario for 0, 0, 0 like this, then you are telling 0 again, 0 again, then it is 1, right? So in this scenario, only this third node, maybe this node 42, is having this 1 bit. All are 0. So that means both are losing the competition and only node 42 will transfer. or I mean, will gain access to the bus.
Okay, ma'am. So basically, if the transition is from 0 to 1, then only we will say that it is not losing or it is gaining the bus.
The transition of 0 to 1 is not the requirement. Requirement is relative. What others are sending, what I am sending. If, see, in the first case, all are sending 0. That means all are same. So there is no, the decision cannot be taken. Decision we can only take when there is a difference. And this 110, that is making the difference that node 42 will lose this competition. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So just I'm telling you bit 1, bit 0, that is wrong. When we will talk in CAN, we will talk about the bit dominance first about the CAN, then we will talk about this voltage high, voltage low, and those things. There the concept of dominant bit is a bit different. It is not like 10 that way. Okay, just you understand this is a bit dominance protocol. Whenever there is a difference in bits, based on that, the decision is taken who will take get hold of the shared bus. Okay. Is there any questions from the previous one? Yes. Yes.
Ma'am, the priority assigned will be static or dynamic?
In case of CAN?
Yes, ma'am.
In this, see, when we are talking about binary countdown algorithm, that can be adopted in different scenarios. And the priority may be static, may be dynamic. But the important thing is that whenever they are releasing that message frame, maybe that 11-bit was generated in a dynamic way or maybe a static way. But whenever it is released, that time, whatever 11-bit, or I should not say 11-bit is for CAN, for other framework it may be different, but whatever it is taken, based on that, the decision will be taken. I mean, whatever ID bits was released, priority related bits are released, based on that, the comparison will be done. But it may be generated in a dynamic way, it may be static, starting from the initialization of your framework. Okay.
Ma'am, all nodes will have unique priority IDs, or is there a possibility that two nodes can have same IDs?
In general, actually, you know what happened? There is a concept of grouping. It may happen that multiple nodes are having same priority ID. In that case, in general, these scenarios are handled by grouping. So from that one, the single group, I mean, whoever comes under same priority, in case of especially this is for static priority, they are grouped, and whenever the priority bit is released, that is single, I mean, that is common for all the nodes under that group. It may happen that multiple nodes are having same priority.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else? Anything else? I mean, I hope you all understood that all these techniques, whatever techniques we have discussed about collision handling or data communication in shared bus, they all have their limitations. So, is there any question about the from previous slides? Because maybe
Ma'am, in token passing. Hello.
Token passing, yes.
Ma'am, in token passing, what we use, a time-bounded token or a cycle-wise a token will be released to other station? What are we doing in token passing?
You think it is also based on your application. But if you think in general, when you are actually allowing a token that a station can hold a token infinite, I mean, unlimited slots of time, what will happen? You cannot actually incorporate
some stations will never transmit the packets.
Exactly. Some station may starve for infinite amount of time. So in your scenario, you may not allow that. It may happen in real-time scenario that when you are designing this type of real-time protocols for a particular station, you know that station is going to release some real-time data. So in that case, you may assign the time bound, you may be adopting the time bound protocol, but the time you are not keeping same for every stations. That is also possible, because you know that that station will be releasing some real-time data more frequent. So you have the prior knowledge about those stations. So maybe you are actually adapting some time-bound token passing, but the time assigned to every station, the threshold time, you are not actually keeping same for every station. That is also possible. So that is entirely based on your framework and your requirement. But those will be minimum. I mean, what to say? These are a few little bit modifications of this main concept of token passing. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Anything else? Any other questions from this? Okay, one thing I wanted to share with you. Lastly, it was maybe not clear. I thought that about this, just a small thing, this persistent strategy. Someone asked me that, but that time the explanation, I think it was not clear. Like when this station, multiple stations, they are going for this persistent strategy, the main idea is some probability outcome is associated with each and every station. Okay. Maybe this is P1, this is P2, P3, sorry. Maybe that is static probability, or runtime. Somehow you are computing, the stations are computing that probability outcome. And if this Pi is less than P, that is that P is defined in such a way that P value, then that station will start. I mean that station will actually start getting the slot, or for with if the probability is 1 by P, then it will go to the waiting mode. So this is the concept of persistent methods, where each station is associated with some probability outcome. Maybe someone is asking the last day forward. That's why. To clear with you. Okay. Anything? Any question from this part? Packet overhead, we will talk later. Token passing. Polling, I hope that is clear. That is too simple. Okay. Okay. I hope there is no question, right? Just go through it. If you have, again, we will take it later. So next, we will be discussing about the basic embedded communication protocols. Okay. And there we will see how we are adding different types of features and how that is affecting the packet overhead. And if thing is that if we can actually allow the packet overhead, we can adopt the feature or adopt the to the advantage in our framework. If not, we have to work with the limited version. And okay, let's start. And so these are very basic few words. That is communication types. You all know that maybe parallel and serial. And under serial communication, that may be asynchronous. That means you are transferring byte by byte. There is no concept of dedicated clock signal that will take care of synchronization between sender and receiver. Whereas in synchronous communication, you have the transfer of blocks of data is controlled by required clock signals. Okay. So these are the, and also the concept of serial and parallel communication, where of course in parallel communication multiple voices are supported. That makes the communication faster, but that is of course more costly. In your embedded scenario, in some cases it may happen you cannot support this type of multiple ways to improve your communication. Okay. Whereas the serial communication is bit by bit, of course that will be slow, but again that will be less costly compared to parallel transmission. Also, these terms simplex, half duplex, full duplex. Simplex is when data is transmitted only to one direction. Half duplex, both the directions are possible, but one way at a time. And full duplex, both ways at the same time possible. Of course, you can, from these diagram, again, you can understand whenever we are supporting this full duplex communication, we have to support that with our hardware. That means it will be more costly. So the same things we will be discussing, that will be reflected when we are talking about few common protocols present in our embedded scenario. Okay, we will be in this class we will be talking about few word communications. UART, SPI, I2C, and then we will talk a few basic about USB. Next day, we will be talking about the embedded wireless protocols. There, we will talk about the ZigBee and all those stuff. Then we will go for the IoT communication protocols. Those are with their few typical features. Okay. So let's start with it today. We will be only talking about this word communication. Of course, for embedded scenario, it's not this is just a repetition that it should be simpler and it should use less hardware and system resources. So the first one, it is the universal asynchronous receiver transmitter. Okay. You can see here in this transmission. Okay, first of all, whenever, though we are talking UART, SPI, I2C together, but there is a basic difference between SPI and I2C, the protocols we will be discussing later. SPI and I2C, they are just protocols. Protocols means some rules, some specifications. That rules or specification that will define how your message transmission is taking place, whether it is a serial or parallel, what are the error handling technologies you have used, what are the other, whether it is synchronous or asynchronous, these type of rules associated with your protocol. But UART is a bit different and it is associated with a physical circuit in a microcontroller or a standalone IC. Okay. So UART is a serial communication protocol where we see when some data bus is trying to communicate in a parallel way, it basically transfers that communication to a serial communication. And this is full duplex because you can see for the UART IC ports, they are associated, they are having separate ports for transmitting and receiving. Okay, so that way this is full duplex. There is no associated clock with it. That's why this is asynchronous, and this is a peer-to-peer communication. Okay, that means dedicated link is present. Now, when we are talking about asynchronous communication, that means clock is not present. Clock is not present means, of course, there will be some mints. You will see this is very common. Whenever you will be studying those any protocols, you will be we will try to observe the common features present in those protocols. Whenever we are talking about asynchronous protocols, we are basically saving somewhere. We are basically saving in time in terms of clock circuitry. No associated clocks are present, but what we have to make sure that there should be some means of syncing the sender and the receiver. And for that, whenever we are forming the packets for this transmission, some associate bits are present, that is the start bit here, terminal start, and stop bit. These are used for synchronization between sender and receiver. That means after the start bit, whatever bits are coming, up to 9 bits, the receiver will consider that as actual message data bit. Okay. And then 1 or 2 parity bits. Now, this parity bit is for error checking. Error check, that means it will hold the parity of this transmitted 9 bits, maybe 5 to 9 bits, 5 paired with initial 4 bits. That is also possible. And this parity checked by this receiver side, the receiver will get to know, receiver will understand if the parity is matches with the parity of the database received in the receiver side, then it is fine. If there is a mismatch, the receiver will come to know that there is some possible change in this data bits during the transmission, and receiver will discard the packet. So that means here this is the error checking strategy provided in UART communication, but that is in very basic level. Now now you understand that if we are associating my error detection with some parity bits and with some multiple bits are changing, then this parity may remain same. In this way, the receiver, in spite of the fact that there is a intermediate change during the transmission, the packet data has been changed. But since parity is same, receiver will not be able to detect that there is there is any modification of actual message data, actual data, whatever, actual packet, whatever sent from the sender side. But what is the advantage? Again, when we have to go for a better solution, we have to pay extra. The advantage is that since you are using this parity type of error handling technique, this is adding very low overhead in your packet. That means you can see here this 9 plus 1, 10, 12, 13. Among 13 bits, up to 9 bits can be your actual message data. So just using a simple version of error check, we are increasing the actual message bit transmission, and we are trying to reduce that packet overhead and trying to increase the message efficiency. Okay, so that way this is a very simple protocol with some simple overhead, but efficiency is good. So what these are advantages, I think it is quite straightforward. Only uses 2 ways, and at least parity bit is there for error checking, all these things. But the disadvantage is that one thing, that only this maximum 9 bits of data transmission is only possible. And also master slave communication, that is most of the cases in embedded scenario, it is a requirement. Well, master slave, we will see this master slave communication in I2C also, SPI also, USB also, where one node or one site, maybe sender, is requesting and acting as a master and trying to get data from the slave. And this type of communication is not restricted to single master or single slave. It may happen we need to concatenate multiple masters and multiple slaves together. So that type of provision is not here. It is a simple protocol where single sender and single receiver and serial communication among them. So with with these disadvantages, next we can discuss this serial peripheral interface, SPI protocol. Now, one major advantage why SPI became popular is that data can be transferred without interruption. We will see how. Here, if you go back, you can see here data is limited to this 9 bits and some 0-1 bit associated with this starting and stopping. That means whatever you are transferring, that is not uninterrupted. This is between these two synchronization bits, the start bit and stop bits. Those are mainly used for synchronization. So that way, SPI is better in terms of supporting transfer of data without any interruption. We will see how. It will go as a continuous stream, and these are the different application. Applications in SD card module, RFID card reader, video streaming. All these in those type of protocols. On those type of applications, this SPI can be used. Now in SPI, this is basically supports this master-slave mode, where this master is controlling the device. This master usually may be a controller, and the slave, maybe you are actually expecting data or fetching data from some slave. Maybe that is a sensor. Now you can take in your CPS scenario or in your embedded scenario, in general, for general applications, this type of requirement is very high. So when we have this master slave, of course, this is there are a few ports associated with it. That is master output, slave input. As the name suggests, you can see from here, master output, slave input, master input, slave output. That means this is full duplet. Just if remembering this structure, you can understand that this is full duplet because both way transmission is possible. You are having SCLK, that is the for clock, that is for synchronization. That means clock synchronization is provided. Okay, and this one is for chip select, where multiple slave support is there. That means if your microcontroller, maybe central controller or computing unit, is trying to fetch data from multiple sensor units, maybe S0, S1, and then it is performing any computation, then this SPI communication protocol will be useful, where multiple slaves can be connected and can perform data transfer to this central unit, to this master unit. Now see, this is how this master and slave is connected. This is there are two possibilities. These chip select lines, when a single master is connected with multiple slaves, this chip select lines, these are the chip select lines, multiple chip select lines. They can select, if it is set enable high, then they can select those type of slaves, and then those slaves, and then data communication can be started. An improvement over this chip selection handling is that here you need 3 ports for this chip selection. But here the same advantage, multiple step selection, can be done with only single chip selection, where you can see this with this chip select line, all these slaves are connected with daisy chain methods. Okay, so daisy chaining method based on the chip select address coming to this line, it can select this one, then and this one, or this one. So this way, of course, that will be again serial processing. Here, parallel processing with multiple multiple connected slaves are possible, but this is some improvement to reduce the number of chip select ports. Okay. Again, that will in turn reduce the, size, cost. In those terms, this part is effective. Okay. So SPI or serial peripheral interface is basically supporting the master slave data transfer in this way. You are having master. The master first outputs the clock signal, and that is the indication it wants to transfer data or begin communication with the slave. Then it is sending the chip select line. This is here only a single slave is shown, but multiple slaves will be there, and this chip select line will indicate with which slave master is interested to start the communication. Then the communication will be bit by bit, okay, and the it will be when master is outputting the data or master is sending data to slave, it will be by this MOSI line. Otherwise, it will come through the MISO line. Okay, so I think this concept is quite straightforward. But the advantage or disadvantage is that if I now compare again back with the UART communication, that there is a no process of acknowledgement. You can see whenever this data transfer is going from master to slave, there is no confirmation from master's side or maybe in slave side if slave is a sender that whether the data communication is successful or not. Also, wearing is high, okay, no acknowledgement, no form of error checking that we have already seen in UART. At least that parity bit was added, but here there is no provision of this type of error checking. Okay, and single master that we will see that there was no concept of UART, the master concept in UART. At least here is a single master concept, but we will see later on another protocol that is I2C where we can support multiple master and multiple slave scenario. But still, with these optimizations or with the support of 4 ways, with these, due to these advantages, we can say, or with some advanced strategies, we are achieving higher data rate compared to UART. Okay, so you can see these are the tentative data rates. The first slide I have kept. This is the tentative data rates for UART, SPI, and I2C. So from there, we are identifying that in SPI, the limitation is if now I have the in embedded communication network, in networking scenario, if we have the requirement of multiple master compared to this single master, then and also how can I reduce, and if it is possible to reduce the wearing to 4 wears to again back to 2 wears, because in UART the wear requirement was 2. Okay, that will reduce the hardware cost also. So for that, the next protocol is I2C or inter-integrated circuit. Okay, let me ask you, is there any question so far? Then I will go to it.
Ma'am, SPI is synchronous, right?
SPI? Oh, yes.
Okay, no, somewhere it was written asynchronous.
SPI is synchronous. Clock is there. Oh, yes, sorry. That is yeah. That is
in one slide. Yeah, there.
Yes. No, that is wrong. Okay. Anything else?
Ma'am, in UART,
yes.
You said they don't share a clock line, right? So, but then how do they agree on a bit duration if they don't share a clock?
No, bit duration is predetermined based on the protocol defined by the protocol. But what I am talking about the synchronization. For synchronization, they are actually adding some extra bits. When clock is not there, adding of extra bits. That is a general convention you can see in different asynchronous protocols. We add some start bit and the stop bit. So this start bit, after a certain communication, the start bit indicates then again there is a start of new data transfer, and after the first bit will be neglected. That will not neglected, that will be not considered as an actual data. The next 9 bits will be considered as actual data. And after that, 1 bit will be considered as the parity bit, and the next 2 bits will be the stop bits. Again, that will not be considered for a particular, not a actual transfer. And then again 1 start bit, and then the next data bit will be considered as a proper data. So that way synchronization is maintained. But bit duration and all that is predefined between sender and receiver. So they know, sender and receiver, they both know what is the bit duration and in which way I can calculate 1 bit, 2 bit or 9 bit, that way. That is predefined.
Yes, ma'am. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Anything else?
Hello,
Okay.
madam.
Yes.
Madam, next slide, madam. In this slide only.
Slide.
Yes, madam. In single chip select line, if I want to select a slave 2, then how I can select, madam? Means I want to communicate with slave 2 only. Like that, it's not possible in single chip select, madam.
Yes. Now this chip select here, maybe if you are having this chip select line actually gives the required ID. Here it will just enable that particular ID, or it will output maybe 00 means first slave, 01 maybe slave 2, 02 maybe slave 3, that way. Based on the number of slaves connected, that will actually give the ID. Based on that ID, the slave will be selected. Okay.
Okay, madam.
Okay. So anything? Okay. Next, we will again. This is maybe that time. Next one is inter-integrated circuit, or I2C. Sometimes some people will say I2C. Both are correct. We generally term it as I2C. Okay. So this supports that the problem we have seen in SPI, that it only allows a single master. Here the problem is solved, that it supports multi-master and multi-slave scenario. Again, this is a serial protocol between two wire interface. Okay, first invented by Philips. That time they wanted to reduce the cost of production of television remote control. So I don't know, how it is exactly related with that, I have to check, but it was invented by Philips at the time. And you can see this communication. Again, one single serial data line is there, and that is, if you now observe that there is a single line, now of course that is half duplex. No provision, both way communication is possible, but at a time it is not possible that both way communication we can consider together at a time. So that way this is half duplex. And the clock signal is associated. That means synchronization is done by this clock signal. And master is connected. There may be a possibility of single master, or there may be a possibility of multi-master. So both are possible. Let's start with the signal master. When the signal master tries to send data to any of the slaves, see here another advantage is that compared to SPI, if you go there in SPI, there was 4 wiring. Here in spite of multi-master and multi-slave, single master, single slave, whatever it may be, varying is only 2. Required varying is only 2. So this master is connected, master and slaves are connected to this SD and ACL line. And the master sends the address of the slave. Okay, it wants to communicate with every slave when it wants to communicate. And every slave then compares the address with their own address. Okay, if the address matches, it sends a low voltage, that is a acknowledgement bit, back to the master. And with that, it connects basically with that voltage, low voltage, it basically remains connected with this SDA line. Then whenever the data communication is taking place, only that particular slave where the address match has taken place, only that slave is either sending data or receiving data to or from master. Okay. Now, considering these protocols, of course, now you can understand that what is the requirement. Maybe the sizes we cannot actually specify. What are the requirements when we are actually forming the message frame? First thing, the master sends the address to the slave. That means there must be some address part associated with the message frame. Then, this is a half duplex communication, and it may happen master can send the master may want to write something in the slave part, in the slave unit, or slave is requesting, I mean, in that way, that means slave is requesting some data from master, or maybe master is trying to fetch some data from the slave. That means either read request or write request. Both are possible, and both we are handling only by these two buses. There is no separate bus for read and write activity. That means that should be whatever is absent in my hardware, that should be added to my message frame. Okay, so that is the concept of overhead. Whenever we are adding overhead, basically we are gaining somewhere. Whenever either we are adding overhead in terms of hardware, so, I mean, either we are adding overhead in terms of hardware, where in hardware we are supporting extra bus, we are supporting extra wear, or we are gaining in terms of and in terms of size of the message frame. And at that time, we are putting extra support in the hardware. So that is anyway, that is the concept of overhead. Here you can see when we are doing this reduction of wearing in from 4 to 2, that is the hardware cost reduction. But for that, we are adding this something to this message frame. We are adding this for this read write bit. So they are there. And also the start conditions, stop condition, just to ensuring the one level on top of level, reassuring the synchronization. One extra feature again is present here that was not there in SPI, that was a drawback limitation of SPI, is the addition of this acknowledgement bit. Okay. Acknowledgement bit, and that too after every 8 bits of data frame. So what is the advantage and what is the disadvantage? Of course, if there would have been a possibility that I could have added here the 17 bits of data transmission and then 1 bit for acknowledgement. That is also same. That is receiver, when it would have been accepted the 17 bit for whole 17 bit, it is sending 1 bit acknowledgement. It could have saved my packet overhead. But now think, if it may happen that receiver is not receiving the whole 17 bit data, then 1 bit acknowledgement is not received by the sender, and in that way the sender is sending in the next frame, it is basically incorporating the whole 17 bit of data. At that time it is fine, we are getting something. But if the case is, if the receiver has received the initial 8-bit data and then for next 8-bit data that was not received, in that case, with this 8-bit specific acknowledgement, from these 8-bit specific acknowledgements, sender will get to know only which 8-bit to send. So in the next message transmission, what the sender can do, sender can actually send new 8-bit data and it can append the old 8-bit data. So effectively, with these two rounds, if we add, then effective number of message bits that we are able to transfer successfully is higher. Okay. So this is the scenario where where the channel is not so reliable. We need more confirmation, more acknowledgement. In this case, I2C communication is useful. Also, it is, of course, this acknowledgement requirement is high because we have reduced the cost of wearing here. We are using just actually only for the data communication, only this single line. For read write, for multiple master, multiple slave, for everything, this single line. That's why here the requirement of acknowledging the whether the delivery is successful or not, that is higher. Okay. So next, this is for single master. Just a little bit extension. Okay. Bit by bit we have talked about, an acknowledgement that we have already talked about. Next, we come to this multiple master, multiple slave version of I2C, where the same bus, same two buses just getting used for this multiple masters. Again, same thing like single master, any master will send the address of the slave and then the communication will start. Only one step extra. Each master needs to detect if the SDR line is low or high, because if already one communication is going on between another pair of master slave, then this master should wait for the next transmission slot. This is also similar concept we have seen in Ethernet and all for shared bus. And when multiple masters are there, because in single master scenario this is not required, because only one master is confirmed that whatever transmission is going on, it is going on between this master and any of these slaves. But when multiple master is coming into picture, this waiting time to check the signal, shared bus should be added as an overhead. Okay. So now we check the advantages and disadvantages. That of course, reduction of wear. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So reduction of wear, multiple masters and slaves, that is of course the improvement over especially SDI. Acknowledgement, not the bit given for confirmation. Okay. Now what is the disadvantage? First thing, this is hard to pay. Fluid data transfer rate. We are adding so many overheads. We are adding address overhead. We are adding acknowledgement overhead. Everything is there. So of course, this is reducing the data transfer, reducing the data transfer rate. Again, the size. This is a protocol based on the protocol. That is a size. The data frame is limited to 8 bits, like part data frame. It is limited to 8 bits, and Of course, this is well understood that more complicated hardware needed to implement SPI, than SPI, because in SPI there was, when you supported more wearing, of course, we have like some dedicated channels. But where this type of dedicated hardware scheduling, like when, how these masters will wait to check when some masters, other masters are actually using that bus. All these protocol scheduling techniques and related hardware should be implemented and incorporated in IT systems. So these are three protocols we have discussed. When in UART, we have seen everything is simple, but master-slave communication, these scenario, multiple communication, we should say, that is not possible. When a central your controller cannot have multiple access or multiple inputs together. When we are coming to SPI, that multiple slave concept is supported, but varying requirement is high. And also, there is no concept of this acknowledgement, error handling, nothing is there. Everything is good. From there, we come to this master slave of, multiple master, multiple slave concept of I2C, when we see that we are adding this shared bus concept now. But while adding this shared bus, we are losing in terms of data transfer. We are also need to add some complicated hardware, and that may take some resource from our embedded resource constraint scenario. Okay, so these are the three basic protocols. So do you have any questions so far?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
In this I2C, what happens if both the masters try to take control of the bus at the same time?
Yes, that's it. For that, you are having some algorithm or dedicated hardware. That is what the masters are doing basically. When they are trying to send data to the data bus, to SCA line, they first check whether this SCA line is low or high. Okay. If this SCA line is low, that means, that indicates that another master has taken control and some communication going on between some other master and slave pair. Then there will be some dedicated rule. There will be some dedicated waiting time for which this master will again wait, and then after that it will go to try for this communication and check whether the line is still low or high. Now again you can think, that's why here's a requirement of acknowledgement. Okay, again it may happen that master 1 and master 2 both together at the same time, they are detecting the line as low, detecting the line as high. That means no communication going on, and at the same time they are releasing their own data. That means the same thing, that the same concept we have seen, that is that's why the requirement of collision handling and all. So in that case, of course, if they are releasing the data at the same time, there will be possibility of collision, and then no data will be delivered. That means master will not receive back the required acknowledgement from slave. You can see there is an initial acknowledgement. That is for the confirmation from the slave, is the slave is actually getting connected to the SDA line. The desired slave is getting connected to the SDA line or not, for next level data communication. After that, this type of data communication start. Frame transmission actually originally starts. So this type, the protocol, this scheduling should be incorporated along with this varying technique. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. One more question, ma'am.
Yes.
Can communication take place between the two masters instead of master and a slave?
Master and a slave, master and master is possible, but in general, but that is also slave to slave communication is not possible.
Okay.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
How can we say like which device is master and which device is slave?
So that is some initially from whenever you're designing your framework, that control is given who can initiate the transmission. That master and master 2, that is, I mean, static, static priority or static control is given to the masters, that they can initiate the transmission to the SDA line. Okay, that is from your design.
Okay, ma'am.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, clock line is there, no, ma'am, in I2C.
Yes.
Then why we need a start?
Yes. Start and I got. You're correct. Stop. Clock synchronization is there. This clock synchronization is basically synchronizing all the slaves at a time. Okay. But when these clock and these clock is synchronized, this master and these slaves is synchronized by this master clock. But when this message, then the master is releasing that message, and then some slave, after this whole initial setup and initial address frame translation, the data frame transmission is actually starting. So to understand the exact point of time, actually this is this SCL, this is for general synchronization between all the slaves and the master. And this start and stop frame, this is for to identify from only for the slave to identify from which part it will actually detect the address frame, after which part it will actually consider this data frame, and so on. So within this is another level of synchronization added, typically just during the identifying the message communication from the starting of the message communication. And this SCL is generally for synchronization of between all the masters and all the slaves. Okay, so this is a two level protection, or you can say synchronization procedure is given. Okay.
Ma'am?
Yes.
Why can't this protocol be used for high-speed communication? Like, we have the SCL in our hand. Like, if we increase the frequency to a large extent, then we can increase the data transmission rate also. We should give.
Yes, we should extend. You are correct. But how? The thing is that everything is controlled by the underlying wiring technique you are using. The underlying communication channel you are using, the way you are implementing, that is maybe analog communication, and those engineers, they can explain you better. Whenever you are designing a communication channel, you are limited with its own design, and from that design you are having some bound on the possible network bandwidth the channel is supporting. So it is not that you can arbitrarily increase anything. And when you are bounded in that very base level, so you understand that anything you cannot increase arbitrarily. Right?
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
Why the acknowledgement between data frame 1 and data frame 2 is required?
Okay. Data frame, you are talking about this one, right?
Yes.
So this acknowledgement, see, this is the first acknowledgement that the receiver is sending when it is acknowledging, okay, I'm ready for the data transmission. Okay. So first one, see, again, you just revisit this message frame that the communication is started, so that any slave can understand with this start condition, and then it is the address frame. It is checking every slave 1, slave 2, every slave is checking, and from these address bits, whatever address it is getting, it is checking with its own address. And if it is ready to transfer, set up a transfer, then it is sending this acknowledgement bit. So this first acknowledgement bit is showing the initial acknowledgement that slave is informing that, okay, this is my address and I'm going to start the transfer with you. Next one is for 8-bit initial, only for this 8-bit, this is the acknowledgement bit, and only for this next 8-bit, this is the acknowledgement. Now you may say it is possible. That's what I was actually explaining, that together I will send 16 bits. In fact, I will save this one acknowledgement bit and I will send a 1-bit data in place of that, and together I will send 17 bits and only one acknowledgement bit for that. That will save my bits in terms of for my actual message requirement. This is fine. For one round, it is okay. But let's think that when in the receiver side, 8-bit data transmission, or in fact among this 16, 17 bits, 15-bit data transmission is successful. Only last 2 or 3 bits of data transmission was not possible due to some failure at the communication channel or failure at the receiver side. Now it is not possible for you to send acknowledgement for every bit. Now from your approach, you are sending a single acknowledgement for the 17-bit. Since the whole 17-bit was not received by the receiver end, so the now receiver will not send any acknowledgement. The sender will understand, the master will understand, okay, whatever 17-bit data I have sent to the slave side, it was not verified properly, let's send it again. Okay. This is one approach. But according to this I2C approach, when receiver is receiving 8-bit initial data and it is sending the acknowledgement for the initial 8-bit data, and if the next acknowledgement for the next 8-bit data is not sent, master is not receiving, then in the next communication, master will only send these last 8 bits, not the first 8 bits. So in the next message frame, when it will develop, it will actually develop with the missed 8-bit data and some 8-bit data, next new 8-bit data, so 8 plus 8. So in that way, if you now consider these 2 rounds, effectively you can actually send new 8-bit data. But if you are using the whole a single acknowledgement bit for whole bit length, then of course in one round that is saving your acknowledgement bit, 1-bit acknowledgement. But in for multiple rounds, retransmission, the possibility of retransmission can be increased. To avoid that retransmission, we are actually using, I2C protocol is actually using acknowledgement based on these 8 bits associated with particular 8 bits. Okay?
Okay, ma'am. One more doubt, ma'am. For the address frame, it is given 7 to 10 bits. Like a total 2^7 number of slaves can be connected.
Yes.
In the real time, is that this many slaves are there?
Yes. In some cases, it is liquid.
Okay.
That's why based on that requirement, they have actually generated this bit size based on the real-time language.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So any more questions? No, I think. Next, we will talk a bit about USB very quickly. Since you are asking that in real time if that much of slaves are required or not. In case of USB, when it was first proposed, maybe USB 1 or version 127 or 180, provision of 127 or 128 slaves were given. So in networking, high-level networking scenario, SCADA scenario, maybe that is useful. That's why they have kept this provision. Okay. So next is the USB protocol, where This is again set of interface specifications for high-speed web communication. And USB supports, that you all know, that is the term is called hot swapping, where you are just plugging or unplugging your devices without the necessity of rebooting. That is called the hot swapping. And since in data in serial mode, used in this tied topology, I will go quickly. I think now you have the intuition. Tied topology means this is the star topology associated with a hierarchy. Like in the star topology, you are having maybe in one port you are adding one USB device, and with that USB device you are making that as a hub, not a single device, and with that you are again connecting multiple peripheral devices. So that is called tiered star or star with hierarchy. Okay, so USB works on that. Now we will that initially USB, there are different versions. Initially when it was proposed, it started with 12 Mbps, and now USB 3, USB C, that works with more than 5 Gbps capacity. And again, this is also a master and slave based works on this master and slave communication concept, where master initiates the communication, takes the control. So when we are talking about USB, we can consider that it can work as a host mode. That means it is initiating the communication, or it can be in the device mode when it is actually supporting the communication requirement or communication request. So both are possible. That is maybe a host mode and if that is a device mode. Mostly USB works in device mode, where some host, maybe your microcontroller, microprocessor, PC, that is hosting the communication requirement, and based on that USB is only supported. Just this is the internal structure, how USB looks like. Okay, I'm not expecting, I think nobody is expecting you to remember all this communication buses, all this the names of everything. No, just understand what are the modules, type of modules there that is present in USB, and that is which module is mainly related, mainly controlling the data communication between the host and the device. Okay, so you can see here, if we actually consider this internal structure of USB, there are 3 layers you can consider. One is wrapper, one is controller, one is PHY level. The system bus. Whenever you're connecting your USB to a host, that is the wrapper is communicating with the system bus. It is a bridge. It is also handles the OTG or on-the-go adapters or the MMR requirements, that is the versatile recorders, or the interrupt handling, debug access, all these types of communication. In short, you can tell the types of communication, whatever comes to USB, that is handled by this wrapper and this wrapper communication part. Okay. Next comes this controller. This controller is mainly responsible between the communication between the main host and the device. Okay. Now this controller is you can see here is the term as DRT controller. What happens when any transfer request comes into picture? I mean, any host is requesting for transfer. Then this multiple transfer request block, they are getting mapped to the main memory unit. Today I'm just telling you the initial idea. Maybe this part we will discuss again tomorrow, because today I will not spend much. Just to give you the idea, the initial this controller part This is called the DRT controller. DRT controller means again dual role device controller. Okay. This controller module basically takes the multiple transfer request blocks. These transfer request blocks are mapped with the main memory of the USB. And when this request comes, this controller takes from the block, and each TRB is associated with some bit that is hardware owned bit. That means this high of this bit shows that some request of bit data block transfer has been made, and once that is satisfied, that hardware HWO bit is set to low. That shows that whatever request was there, that is processed, and the USB that block is ready for next levels of new data transfer. So that is the job of this controller, where this DRT controller basically which takes this request block, and mapping is done with the memory part, and then communication is taking place. Next is this PHY module. Now this PHY module, it is basically related to modulation. Modulation means if you see USB, it is actually supporting multiple speeds, high speed, low speed, and you can see the recent advancement is the super speed, that is the USB 3. You know, the final, the recent architecture of USB, the version of version of USB is USB 3, that is related to, that is called super speed. Now, how the super speed is achieved? With special cable. Someone is asking why we cannot actually improve unlimited data speed or bandwidth, something like that. Because this is based on the underlying varying. If we can improve that underlying hardware, we can of course improve the top level protocols. So here, with that improvement, basically this part, this USB 2, this is the backward. It is maintaining with the backward version, maintaining with the backward version, and whatever protocols, communication protocols, mapping requirement was there, that is maintained in this USB version 2. Okay, that is just for backward compatibility, nothing else. And this USB SS, this is for the super speed part of USB that is present in USB version 3. So that is for the compatibility with this modulation portion. This PHY, this module is basically considered, we can consider this as a bridge between the main controller and the actual speed modulator. Okay, and this wrapper part is basically a bridge between this controller and actually the system bus. So these are the three different parts present, three different components, or you can say parts of the framework present inside the USB. Okay, one is wrapper, one is the controller, and this is the PHY module. Okay. Now with this, the communication takes place, and this is the memory mapping of USB, where the total memory of USB, we know that we are just using them for data storage, but total memory of USB is basically divided in this fashion. They have wrapper registers. These wrapper registers are used when we see this is for mapping, maybe some address mapping with different devices. When you are actually plugging to some device and address mapping is required, then to communicate maintaining the communication in the bus, then this wrapper register, this part is getting used. Then host, then device level registers are there. Those are something for, some part is for debugging, that is the internal information storing. For that, those registers are used. And then the final, this RAM. These RAMs are designed in this FIFO fashion. These are used for mainly the data storage. Okay, so this is the basic organization of memory, and some parts are storage, of course, some parts are reserved as for future use. So these are the basic organization of memory. So when we are talking about USB, of course, when we are supporting this tied star structure, as we mentioned, that is only possible by this wrapper, controller, and PFI module of USB, where each of them has a dedicated function. And mainly this DRT controller, with the help of these transfer request blocks, they are actually taking the request from host and they are transferring the block to the the requested device. And the whole thing is actually controlled by this DRT controller part. So this is a detail of what are the links present in this PHA module and this module. So this is the basic of USB, and maybe you can go through the signals. It is not required that it is just for your information. It is not required that you have to remember all these buses and why it is used for. At least you should have some basic idea that how these controllers, they are communicating with your host, and how when we are talking about this different data space supporting USB, supporting in different versions, how and from which module the control is taking place. In USB-C, when we are checking that this is the newest feature, maybe in USB, which supports easier plugin, reversible plugin. So the improvement of USB basically due to two major reasons. One is this separate USB SSPHY layer that supports data communication with some special cable. This is one. And another one is the power delivery mode. That is a negotiable. USB is having some negotiable power delivery mode where the USB, this standard can actually negotiate and choose between appropriate level of power flow. So that is very unique to USB-C version, and that's why. And that negotiation or what to say, that choosing of this different power mode also can be controlled by this layer. Okay. So these are the typical features of USB-C. This is just for your information, that what are the layers inside and how the internal structure of USB-C or USB version C actually that looks like, and what is the memory organization present inside this. Okay, maybe that I have taken quickly. Do you have any questions, or maybe if you want, I will take it next day also, a bit later. Okay. Any question you want to ask? Nothing? Here? Then I have a question. Can you tell me, we discussed about Ethernet. Okay. If I want to use Ethernet in my embedded scenario, what assumptions I have to make?
Like my real-time requirements are like they are much higher than the randomized delays that are required when multiple tasks have to be handled.
Yes, that is the random random waiting time when we are we are using, then the range of the random numbers the stations can actually choose, that may come, I mean, with that we can actually introduce the concept of pseudo randomness. That means the random number they can choose within a specific range, and from that we can calculate that if that range is sufficient to handle our real-time requirements. So in that way we can actually modify the embed Ethernet, and a restricted form of Ethernet we can actually use, restricted randomized form of Ethernet we can actually use in embedded scenario. Okay. So anything else? Any more questions you have? No, I think. Okay. Then that's all for today. Tomorrow maybe I will discuss a bit more about that USB part, and then we will move to the embedded wireless protocols. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.